Welcome to Fieldsports Britain. Coming up, duck! We're out with the Hull and East Riding wildfowlers in the glorious Humber estuary. Now, are you at school and do you think you're the best shot in the country? You can find out with the Schools Challenge. And the best of British big game shooting. We're off to see African animals in Kent. First, British wild boar, and more interestingly, what are they like to shoot? A wildlife medieval relic is back. We now have truly wild British boar, and if you believe the hype, they're everywhere. From original escapees in the south of England after the Great Storm of 1987 to the new arrivals roaming the Caledonian forest in Scotland. Most hunters want to manage them, and the government wants to ignore them. So what will happen to these incredible animals now they have their second chance? We take a look at what's happening down in Sussex, where these truly wild pigs are now in their 23rd season. On the continent, where boar hunting is in the blood, and in Scotland, where they're big and bold. Colin Hinckley has been hunting boar in the woods around East Sussex for nearly 20 years. For him, there's nothing quite like it.
I've shot an awful lot of deer. I've shot deer all over the country, but still, to shoot a proper wild boar, and we're on 23 generations now. They're as wild as they're ever going to be. Makes your heart pound. And they're just a magical, mystical animal. They're incredible. They can jump like a show jumper, swim like a fish. They appear from nowhere. To do it properly, they're incredibly difficult to shoot. If you want to murder them, go and buy a night sight. It's dead easy then.
Colin observes a self-imposed season, something the government has chosen not to impose. So now is the best time for him and Dom to manage the pigs for a local landowner who would rather his fields didn't look like this.
Quite often you'll skin them and they'll be full of shotgun pellets where somebody's had a ding at them with a shotgun. Again, the pig don't deserve that. If you're going to shoot them properly, fair and square, and do the job properly. I've noticed in the last 4 years, 5 years, there's not as many about. We're not seeing as many when we're shooting as we were seeing, so they do need some help, definitely, and DEFRA could do a bit more and put a season on them. If they put a season on them, the pigs will be about forever. If they don't, they will disappear.
Wild boar can cause a lot of damage, but sadly these animals are not given the basic right of other quarry species of having an official season. The government still treats them as something between pest species, unwanted exotics, and, when they start scaring members of the public, a political embarrassment. A few days ago, Dom shot this young male. He and Colin tend to go out when there's a full moon, as using a night sight just isn't sporting.
This particular pig turned up in a group of 15 when we had the hard weather recently, the snow. It concentrated probably 2 or 3 sounders together. And in a group like that, if there's a large animal, that'll almost always be one of the matriarchs of the group, a large sow. And we avoid shooting those at all costs because that's the future of the sport.
Like Colin, Dom is concerned that this wonderful animal could be on its way out if the indiscriminate killing doesn't stop. So what is the answer? Well, in Croatia, the wild boar is part of the folklore and a major part of the rural economy. We've come to meet Tomo Svetic from a UK-based sporting agent called Artemis Hunting. He's arranged a driven boar hunt for us. The day starts with a briefing. Then the beaters and the swinehounds are sent off to push the boar through the woods. On the other side, whispered instructions are given to the guns. The horn is blown and the hunt begins.
Up! Up! Ho! Up! 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 Ho!
In the distance, a large boar breaks cover. It's too far away. Then a dog brings a group of boar within range. It's a clean shot and we've bagged a 5-year-old male.
It will be a small ceremony about congratulations to lucky shot. The hunter who shot it. The gamekeeper will give him a small branch as a symbol of nature, of wood, where the shot was placed, and he will congratulate him for good shot. So 1 shot, 1 kill, which is really important.
The boar is tagged so the meat can be tracked from field to plate. It also allows the authorities to keep a tab on how many animals are being taken every year. The day has been very well organised and respectful. The skill of the hunter and the boar are celebrated. Over here, these spectacular beasts can grow to quite staggering sizes. This is the current record holder, weighing in at 340 kilograms, about 53 stone. The next day I have an early morning in a high seat. Sadly, it proves unsuccessful, but you can't ignore the thrill of the boar.
Can't beat being here, and you can't beat the excitement of being in the high seat and the woods, and there was a little bit of water just there, and you could hear the kind of, and that was a deer going past, and then a kind of and that was boar, and then they went into the water and they didn't come out where we wanted them to come out, but you know, it's absolutely unbeatable.
It takes a lot of effort and manpower successfully to hunt boar here. In the south of England it takes a lot of patience and a lot of food. It is rare to see them in daylight, and it's becoming even rarer to see them under a high seat under a full moon.
I fed this yesterday, hasn't had any pigs on it at all. A few pheasants have scratched around and a few pigeons look, but this, you know, normally you'd expect to see this gone and a big crater dug down in there where they'd literally just come along and scooped it up. At night you'd feed it again the next day, but this is getting more and more common now, where it just isn't, you know, the pigs are just not about to feed on it.
So what about the new hunting grounds for British boar, where new escapees from farms like these have added a new species to the quarry list, north of the border? Well, at the moment they're completely unconcerned by the threat from humans. In fact, this one is more of a threat to me, and I leg it. I can safely say there are boar here, and where there are boar, there are people willing to pay good money for them. So, what next? We know there are boar populations all over the UK. The government reckons they number in their hundreds. Locals reckon in their thousands. If we shooters want to keep them, we have to build relationships with landowners who are losing money because of them, and show the boar the same respect we show other large game in this country. From big piggies to little birdies. Shooters got a late Christmas present in a huge fall of woodcock. We went to one of the hot spots, the East Riding of Yorkshire.
Yeah, well, if you get a northeast wind that coincides with the moon, you get a good fall of woodcock normally, and especially if you get some hard weather in Scandinavia, on the continent, and it pushes a lot of birds over. So we get some big falls of woodcock in the hard weather, you know, certainly with a northeast wind and when it coincides with the moon.
And have we just had one of those?
Yeah, this year there's been a lot of woodcock. I mean, I'm walking around on the farm that I've got the shooting on. It's been the best woodcock year that I've seen for a long, long time. A local shoot shot 66 in one day, and that's, you know, 8 and 10 guys driven shooting. It's quite a respectable bag for a woodcock. I mean, near where we stood now, I know like 10 years ago they shot 99 in one day, but even on the small days that we all used to do, you know, as young men just leaving school, we used to shoot, if we didn't shoot double figures and a walk around the two of us together, then it wasn't really a good day. The east coast really is where the woodcock first land. I mean, all the east coast really down to the Wash, right up to Scotland, is where the woodcock first actually, land, but they don't stay too long before they move on. But everybody talks about the Western Isles being the place for woodcock, and of course in the southwest in Cornwall. But the big falls of woodcock actually land on the east coast, but they don't stay around too long. I mean,
is that because the ice, they're trying to escape the ice, and if it's icy here, then the West Country gets them?
That's right. Yeah, to a degree. I think the first drop here, it's the first landfall. They've had a long flight over a big pond, so it's the first landfall here on the east coast. But when it's On the on the inland, when if it's frozen and very hard weather like we've just experienced, I think a lot of the inland woodcock actually move back onto the coast because the coast is just that slightly warmer, and the ground's not hard, so they can actually feed.
Now tell me how the lighthouse played a part in all this.
Yeah, when we were youngsters, we knew the lighthouse keeper very well, and in November on the first moon, if he picks up a woodcock at the bottom of the light, because there were that many birds coming over, someone hit the light, and then we knew that the woodcock were in, and then everybody grabbed his gun and we walked all the hedges and the gorse up.
But I mean, big bags of woodcock. Do you think that that's bad for the woodcock population? People do sometimes get excited about that.
No, I think woodcock's a sustainable species. What we get in the winter time is the numbers are massively joined by migrants from Europe, mainland Europe, Scandinavia. So we're shooting the migrant birds, and as long as obviously they go back at the end of the season, as long as the numbers are high over there, you know, it's not just managing our birds over here, because most birds we shoot are migrant birds. So as long as the birds have got a decent population and looked after where they come from, I don't see a problem with it.
They're a tremendously exciting bird, and they have a great sort of mythology attached to them. Tell me about the pin feather.
Yeah, well, the pin feather's a prize. It's almost a trophy, really, for a woodcock shooter. And you know, many people keep the pin feathers. They're very favoured by artists. They like to use them. So
Dr. Andrew Hoodless of the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust wants the wings. Why is that?
It's for research purposes, Charlie. They work out where and when which migrants and which are home birds, and they're going to build up, from what information they can get from that, a story of actually what is happening to the woodcock populations. But Dr. Hoodless is quite welcome to have the wings. That we've got yesterday's birds from the shoot. There's 28 birds shot yesterday, and there's 7 birds we've shot this morning. He'll be getting theirs.
And if you shoot a woodcock and want to help the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust Woodcock Project, you will find more info on its website, www.gwct.org.uk. Now let's get kids shooting. The Oxford Gun Company has been brilliant in the last few years at getting young people shooting, and now they're running the Schools Challenge.
Beautifully done.
From the very beginning, one of the things that we've always tried to do is promote our sport to other people. And one of the best ways to do that we found was through youngsters. The first time I came into contact with shooting in schools was when I first started work at West London Shooting Grounds. And in those days, the boys from Harrow School used to come down to West London Shooting Grounds on a Wednesday afternoon and have lessons. They weren't allowed to go clay shooting, so what they did, they joined the Army's Det Corps, and the master who ran that was a very, very keen shooter. So on a Wednesday afternoon, they all used to get dressed up in their fatigues, jump into an old camouflage Land Rover, and then drive from Harrow School down to West London Shooting Grounds, where Mike Rose used to give them a lesson, and then they used to drive back implying that they'd been rifle shooting, but they'd actually been shotgun shooting. So it's the first time I really came in contact with schools promoting, if you like, clay shooting.
When we left school, we kind of thought there's nothing really to push teenagers in to take it up the sport of clay shooting, or shooting in general. And the idea of it came around a pint. And it came up, was just one event a year at the Oxford Gun Company for local schools and individuals to come and practice for the nationals. And then it kind of, the first year we did it, we only had, I think it was 50 people. And then it kind of snowballed from there. It's open for any school or university or college or individual. The category to basically to be allowed to shoot in it is you have to be under 21 and in full-time education. If you're a teenager and you want to take up shooting, I won't say clay shooting, the Schools Challenge is there. It will take you right from novice right the way up to the experienced shot, and you can win a gun, you can win clay traps, all sorts of things. I mean, this year we've got the sponsorship is doubled from last year. It's £40,000 over the 2 shoots, over the 2 clay competitions, and there's 7 guns up for grabs.
So of course we have to try out some of the stands. David takes me out to the entry-level clay traps.
Shirley, my parents, have been into shooting and into building shooting grounds and starting up shooting grounds. They've always liked to keep things natural, keep things the way shooting has always been to be. None of this modern concrete and it's always nice to, you cross the little bridges and people remember that sort of thing. It's how the countryside should be. This will be one of the stands. There'll be 3 or 4 pairs on here that they will shoot.
So pairs going ching ching and ching ching.
Yeah,
and
pairs will be either it'll be an incomer, possibly going away bird.
What was the trick there?
The trick was, on a going away bird, you always got to think to yourself, you've got to stay underneath them. That was quartering in to me, so I just thought to myself, go underneath it, just up the right hand side slightly, and kill it. And the incomer, let it come in, and it's just sitting in the sky. When it sits in the sky, just look at the bottom edge of the clay, pull the trigger.
Brilliant. Do you get a lot of swearing from the children when they come out here?
No,
or
to be honest,
they're very well behaved.
The children are very well behaved.
The first stand was a doddle, but now it's getting harder. David shows how to hit tricky crossers.
Well, we got a crosser,
Yeah.
and a driven, a little driven.
So the gate stand was more of your sort of entry, you know, warm up and.
A warm-up stand, and this one's a slightly more challenging one. It's not really hard, but it gets harder, and it gets harder as we move on down the course.
Any tips for this one? Any easy tips?
With the crosser, shoot it reasonably in the middle of the stand.
Yes.
And just go out in front of it. You want to be about 2 or 3 foot in front of it. Pull the trigger. With a driven, shoot it reasonably about there. Go out in front of it. Pull the trigger. Pull.
Okay. So don't do that thing of do
and
the ring
also,
and then try and take it too late.
Don't leave it too late. Shoot it reasonably early, nicely.
Now, is there something about if you're shooting a right to left, you don't give it as much lead as if you shoot to left to right? Is that right?
Not really.
Not really.
No.
Okay,
not in my experience of shooting anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just various different targets, different distance, speed, varies of how much lead you have to give them.
And above all, for this, keeping the enthusiasm, keeping the kids interested.
And also you got on things like this, makes you keep the gun moving.
The Oxford Gun Company Playground has some superb stands, but the school challenge is designed to be fun as well as testing, and they don't want to put off the youngsters who take part by sending tricky birds over them.
All parents want their son or daughter to do well, but you've got to remember that, and the parents have got to remember, they're here for a good day out. And when you're 15, 16 years old, they have to have a bit of fun as well. They have to have a laugh. Okay, they all want to shoot well, they want to win something, but they've got to learn not to be too pushy, because the more pushy you get, the less likely they're going to want to do it.
Well, the more unrelaxed they're going to be, the less good they're going to be.
And then you put more and more pressure on the people. I mean, I've always been taught that you go out to shoot, you shoot to enjoy it. If you go shooting and you land up going out shooting and you think to yourself, and you have to get up in the morning, you think, oh, what am I doing? Why am I going shooting? You shouldn't be going. So you go out shooting to enjoy yourself.
Case shooting, that's the last sport where people truly enjoy themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That'll do.
An incredibly popular stand at the school's challenge is the Browning Rabbit Mania.
Why is it called Rabbit Mania?
It's called Rabbit Mania because basically it is Rabbit Mania. It's got 4 traps and you shoot a sequence of rabbits. You shoot 4 singles first, which you have full use of the gun, so in a way you can't miss it because you've got 2 cartridges at 1 bird. Then you have on-report pairs, and then you have simultaneous pairs. And you shoot a sequence of 20 targets, and it's how many you hit out of 20.
Up for grabs is a brand new Browning shotgun. If you are under 21 and want to take part in the school's challenge, it couldn't be easier. Visit the website for more info, www.theschoolschallenge.co.uk. Lions, hyenas, hippo. In Kent, we visit the museum of Major Powell-Cotton. Major Percy Horace Gordon Powell-Cotton was a man before his time, a pioneer and a hunter. While others went to Africa to blast large animals, he made 27 trips there, not in search of trophies, but in the name of science. He brought back hundreds of specimens, all tagged and logged, with an exact record of where each kill was made. He created the Quex Museum in Kent in 1896, creating life scenes or dioramas, bringing the strange and exotic to this part of rural England. His desire was to collect a representative of all the big game of Africa.
He collected longitude, latitude, weights, measurements, the skull, the skeleton, the skin. So he wasn't actually a trophy hunter. He was a scientific collector, really. and a man well ahead of his time. When Major Powell-Cotton was born in 1866, the Origin of Species hadn't been that long published. So he was following in the footsteps of people like Darwin, and although not many people have heard of Powell-Cotton, out of all the explorers and conservationists and big game hunters of the time, he's the only one that's left an institute like this behind.
Malcolm has been the curator here for 35 years. He never met Major Powell-Cotton, who died in 1940, but he knows every part of this collection. He's also a taxidermist and marvels at the Major's ingenuity and resourcefulness.
He was a bit of a leader of his time in preservation of large game, particularly whole elephants and whole giraffe, which at that point in time, very few people, if any, I would have thought, would have undertaken such a huge project. I mean, if you've shot a big bull elephant of like 4.5, 5 tonnes, and it's laying on its side, how do you skin the other side? You've got to roll over 5 tonne of dead weight. Well, that's fine if you've got a big Land Cruiser there with a chain, like today, but in those days it would have been manpower. And then getting the skin off and then walking it back to camp. I mean, the giraffe would have been done all in one piece as a rule. We've got photographs of the actual giraffe skins actually on huge poles with wooden platforms underneath that were built in the bush, just to get the airflow up through. And then he double labelled every specimen. He used a cloth label with black Indian ink, so if it got wet, it didn't run. And then his empty cartridge cases, he cut those up into sections, flattened them out, and then stamped a number on it, and then tied that to the skin and the skull and the skeleton. Ray Mears would probably be left out in the cold a little bit, I think, when we had people like this, because they really did have to think on their feet. And of course, obviously, they had to take the very few drugs that they had. All they had was quinine and brandy. Malaria would have been rife, blackwater fever. To go through all of that, 27 trips, and come out the other end relatively unscathed, he also was pretty lucky as well, I think.
Luck was certainly on the Major's side after a lion attacked him on an expedition to Africa in 1906. His safari suit bears the scars. Needless to say, the lion is also on display at the museum.
He actually shot the lion and wounded it. He broke its jaw with the first shot. He reached around for his other rifle, and the lion charged and bore him to the ground, and his gun bearer had run off. He was lucky because he broke its jaw, it couldn't bite him, but he did receive something like 16 claw wounds to his back and his chest. He was pretty lucky because he didn't end up with septicemia, blood poisoning.
If you want to go hunting in Africa, it can cost an arm and a leg. It was no different at the turn of the 20th century.
His longest trip was nearly 3 years. That was to parts of British East Africa. That trip at that time cost him £4,000, which was around about 1905. That equates to about £1.5 million today. That was just to run the safari. I'd love to have 5 minutes with him in a room to find out how he actually got all this material back when you're like 500 miles into the interior and you've shot maybe 30 or 40 specimens of animals and big game and collected ethnography. How the hell did he get it all back? It must have been, the man must have been a genius, because even by today's standards it would be an enormous undertaking. So he must have been a great organiser and a man of great logistical means.
Time to leave the galleries and go behind the scenes. These days this incredible archive is being pored over by academics. The bones and sinews provide an irreplaceable reference library of DNA. Zebra, lion, hyena and bear are all catalogued in the very boxes in which they were originally stored, from Bovril to Fortnum and Mason. The wrapping paper also makes an interesting read.
They're wrapped in, this is the Times 1934.
Back upstairs and time to look at Major Powell-Cotton's rifles. The Major's favourite was a Mannlicher.
This is a Mannlicher schooner. It's a 6.5mm bullet hit through with a telescopic sight that was an optional extra from W.J. Jeffries, and we still have the original sale catalogue, and that particular rifle cost £22 and 10 shillings in those days. Don't think you get a new Mannlicher for that today. We do have another Mannlicher. There's a pair of them, but the other one hasn't got the telescopic sight on it. I've shot 1 or 2 of them, but I have to say, looking through that telescopic sight is like looking through a dirty milk bottle. they're not quite like the Zeiss scopes and Bosch and Lomb and Leopold scopes we have on the rifle, today's rifles.
Prices for big game trophies are at their highest ever, fueled by collector interest and a more unsavoury market for Chinese traditional medicine and Yemeni dagger handles. Rhino horn is now worth more than gold. But it is the Major's passion for African game, his incredible attention to detail, which means that this collection is priceless. International studies such as the Giant Sable Antelope Project rely on data from his specimens.
It's a huge reference library, and it's getting more and more use as the years go on. And it's thanks to Major Powell-Cotton and his meticulous record keeping that makes this collection irreplaceable.
Major Powell-Cotton was a hunter, a survivor and a man of vision. To the founder of Wagby, Stanley Duncan, these marshes on the north bank of the Humber were a paradise. What was Wagby? The Wildfowlers Association of Great Britain and Ireland, forerunner of the shooting organisation Basque, which has 130,000 members. We come here to meet Ken Arkley, who has been wildfowling here for decades. Well, Ken, it's brilliant weather for ducks and an incredibly bleak landscape. What on earth are we doing?
We're here alongside Winstead Drain, which leads into Paddington Channel, into the Humber, and later on, hopefully, I'm going to take you down onto the marsh, and with a bit of luck and a break in the weather, perhaps, we might see a few ducks. Predominantly at the moment, there's a little bit of activity with teal and widgeon on the river.
Now, this is the north bank of the Humber, and it's really one of the great duck centres of Britain, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say it was one of the great duck centres of Britain, but like everywhere else, we like to think that what we do on the river here, or a little bit for conservation, etc. We're trying to improve the situation, we're trying to improve habitats, we're looking to manage the shooting better to hopefully improve duck numbers. The area is seeing a lot of changes over recent years with duck movements and geese. This eastern end of the river is starting to see more goose numbers at certain times of the year, and it's a continually changing situation, and we like to think that we're doing our bit to help that along.
That's the Hull and East Riding Wildfowlers Association, and also there's another one here on the North Bank, isn't there?
The other North Bank club is Holderness and Humber Wildfowlers Association, and we work in conjunction with them. We share most of our shooting on the Humber. Our leased areas are all shared with the other club. We work very closely together, and as I say, with the joint aims of trying to improve everything to make sure that the sport carries on for future years. I'm going to set out a pattern of decoys, and we'll get ourselves secreted in the cover and hopefully wait for a few packs of teal that are moving up and down the river at the moment, and perhaps even the odd widgeon or even a bonus mallard. At the moment the mallard have been a few and far between, but again, you never know.
You never know with wildfowling. It is one of
the whole part of it. You never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. You like to think that you know or learn all the movements of the birds, etc., but you never get 2 days the same, and that's the beauty of wildfowling.
Get back! Good girl! Good girl! Put it on! Put it on! Good girl! Good girl! Put it in! Yeah, put it here, put it here.
It's an addictive sport, isn't it? I mean, people who are wildfowlers are lonely characters, tall and rangy like you.
Yes, I think that is a big part of it. It's nice to be out there. We don't. A true wildfowler doesn't have to shoot something every time he goes out. They get as much enjoyment as just being on the marsh, being out in the open. Some people would call us crazy being out in weather like this, but that's the way we get our enjoyment.
Well, great to visit the home of Stanley Duncan, proto-wildfowler. If you want to find wildfowling clubs near you, our directory lists them. Go to www.fieldsportschannel.tv/directory, stick in your postcode and click on Find Shooting. Now this programme is back in 2 weeks' time when shooting expert Mike Yardley will be teaching us how to hit high pheasants. Shooting politics is next week. This has been Fieldsports Britain. We let the cat out of the bag and then we set the dogs on it.